Veľká vďaka aj Rainers Aluminium za podporu festivalu Dni architektúry a dizajnu a Dni architektúry a filmu. Aj vďaka tejto spoločnosti sledujeme bohatý program, zameraný tento rok na federálnu scénu, ale nie len. Ideme aj ďalej do zahraničia a priestor na Dňoch architektúry a dizajnu dostane aj v tomto roku množstvo zahraničných architektonických štúdií a osobností, ktoré majú čo povedať a najmä, ktoré majú akým spôsobom inšpirovať. Architektonické štúdio Dierendonck Blancke z Ghentu a vzniklo v roku 1999. Isabel Blancke a Alexander Dierendonck reprezentujú novú vlnu belgickej architektúry, ktorá si osobitým, výrazne intuitívnym prístupom k tvorbe získala oprávnený medzinárodný rešpekt. Svedčí o tom aj mnoho ocenení za rôzne typológie od občianskych, bytových cez kultúrne stavby až po malé intervencie. To, čo ich odlišuje od iných architektov, je očividná normálnosť a prirodzená integrácia života klientov do prostredia, ktoré navrhujú. No a práve dnešný večer pokračuje ich prezentáciou. Now we are connected with Alexander Dierendonck. Are you with us? Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we are honored to have you here on the first day of this festival. You are the first foreign speaker of this year.
Oh. Nice.
How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Very good. It's really an honor to be invited by you, and it's a pleasure to show some of our work and our approach to architecture. Thank you.
We are looking forward to see your presentation, and if you are ready, you can start. Are you?
Yes, I am. I will try to share a screen. I hope technology will help us.
Dámy a páni, pozrieme si teraz prezentáciu Alexandra Dierendoncka. Perfect, Alexander. We are listening.
Okay. I will set my timer. So, I'm Alexander Dierendonck of Dierendonck Blancke Architects, together with Isabel Blancke. We are a couple, private and professional. We have our studio in Ghent, in the center of Belgium. And we started our studio in 2009. And since then, we started only with two of us. And today we are an office of more or less 20 persons working on different projects. The lecture I would like to give to you is more or less about how we approach and how we deal with specific complex programs, and try to have a very simple answer to a very complicated question. So most of the projects are with complex programs, difficult conditions, but the answer should be simple. And that's for what we count, that's what creativity is about for us. So in search of the obvious, so a project of us is well designed or succeeds when it looks like it has always been there. So I have this cartoon I found in a Belgian newspaper a couple of years ago, and it states, you see a picture of two guys, obviously businessmen, looking at some drawings, and they talk to each other and they say, what about, we might ask the architect to get rid of all the rubbish, we could get along very well. So that's a little bit what I confronted with when I look around me and see all these built environment with complicated buildings and gestures that are made for the ego of the architect. It kind of bothers me. So this cartoon states quite well what we are, how we are. I would like to start my lecture with some references, pictures we took ourselves or pictures we see in publications. I will not give you too much detail about it or explanations, but it's the totality of the images, the stream of consciousness about these images that could give you an idea how we look to architecture, what inspires us, what we are sensible to. The first is the Kröller-Müller Museum by Geert Riffelt in the Netherlands. There is also the Mask by Lina Bobardi, who is one of our heroes, in fact, because she operated in dense cities with complex social situations, and she manages to create public spaces that can be appropriated by people. So this appropriation of space that we create by other people, the people who use the building, is very important. As you will see in the projects I will show, that this kind of the way people take possession of our projects is very important and is the main goal of what we do. We get inspired by different architects, but also by the sleekness, the sharpness of the buildings of Gordon Bunshaft. This is the one in Washington. But we get inspired also by everyday details we see everywhere around us, every day, in sometimes very unexpected places. We encounter a lot of stuff that inspired us. Maybe this is a detail we found in Italy, in Urbino, a very nice town. You all know, but it might also be the ceiling of the supermarket. It's everywhere, our inspiration. Another hero is obviously Alvar Aalto, the way he deals with nature, detailing, and kinds of simplicity, complex simplicity. This is an image of the poetry of art. Artists are a great inspiration for us. This is the altar by Chris Martin, a friend of ours. This kind of poetry into the environment is very important for us. It's kind of a super extra layer that gives depth into the projects. What is very important also, we don't consider ourselves as architects, as architects, not as artists. So the artist has a complete other profession than the architect. And it might confuse, it's sometimes confusing for architects that pretend to be artists. Another nice, well-designed, sharp object by Gordon Bunshaft. Also the poetry of Ignacio Gardella, which is rational, but in the same time, it has some playfulness. The Dutch architect Aldo van Eyck, who inspires us a lot with his simple buildings for the people, human scale buildings, with a lot of detail and attention to the human being. Everyday life, the sheds, everywhere you can find them. Architecture made by people who don't intend to make architecture. Some utility details, some nice details in buildings. This is Siedlung Halen in Switzerland, a very nice collective housing project, where sometimes in detailing, in simplicity of detailing, useful details inspire us a lot. A fence, a simple fence somewhere in Flanders, and obviously at the end, our models. We are an office that makes a lot of models, and that's what helps us stay in touch with the architect. A model doesn't lie. Normally we don't like the high-end renderings. No V-Ray for us. We don't. We stick to the model. The model is the reality and does not lie. I will show you 6 projects. You will see, I will try to explain them a little bit, how we approach the program. And you will see that the sensitivity of the references, I hope so, are also present in our projects. The first project I will show you is a housing for mentally disabled people. So it's a competition we did about 10 years ago on a site in Flanders somewhere in the wood. There was the project for an existing campus for housing mentally disabled people, but also physically disabled people. And they asked us to make a new master plan to do a conversion of the site on that site. So these were the pictures we took when we visited the site. And what struck us that in fact, the existing housings, we could not see them almost. They were hidden in the green. It was very nice. It was very, very huge, but there was no readability. You kind of didn't find where you need to go. The paths were difficult to read. Well, this was more or less the situation. Some housings and a very present axe that cuts the whole site in two. So our proposal was, in fact, to instead of have this axis, to create kind of a ringway that is very readable, that creates an inner space and an outer space. This ringway serves, in fact, the new housing topologies, the clusters of houses. Each cluster has 5 houses and goes right through the middle of the housing, the 5 houses. This means that in fact, this in-between space in between the houses becomes very important. So you can see we kind of created small courtyards, and these courtyards will animate the houses and create small communities. Instead of just having the housing somewhere hidden in the greenery, we wanted to make present houses that are very active and very part of the daily logistics of the institution. Landscape-wise, we would maintain the dense forest outside of the ringway, but inside the ringway, we would like to open up the space, create visual relations with an open plane in which you can see, in fact, the houses and have an overview on the side. So this is a more detailed scheme where you start from the more abstract scheme that explains our ideas, the application into the site where you can see the exact location of the different phases, and also a kind of a new introduced hierarchy between the motorway, ringway, and all the pedestrian and cycle bikes who links all the houses. So this is what it looks like now. This is one of our interventions. So this new introduction of concrete paths that are very simple, but make a nice gesture or link or mixture with the existing nature. So that's what it looks like from the inner space. We maintained obviously the existing green, but we created kind of new clusters that are very readable and visible from everywhere onto the site. So this is a picture of the first cluster we constructed. So this was the existing situation. So we made a master plan in which we had different components to realize. During the last 10 years, we more or less realized the whole place. It's also a question of designing opportunities and having future-proof solutions. So instead of having their demand of having each time clusters of 5, we designed the clusters with the optional 6th house. It means that, in fact, the institution is able to, on a long term, choose for extra houses on the site linked to the clusters and the courtyards. So this is more or less the plan with the existing greenery and the open space. And then the end situation in which each cluster also has private gardens and is well embedded with greenery around the houses. The hierarchy of pathways. So this was our first phase. We started in 2010. So we were lucky to get different phases. So we designed the second one, the third one. Today we constructed the 4th one that is in use. And next year, we will start conception of the 5th one to eventually make a complete master plan in the end. When we focus on the courtyard, what was for us very important is that in fact each house has, this is one house, these are 5 linked houses. Each house has a direct link with the inner courtyard. This inner courtyard that become the beating heart of this group of houses. This will become a community, each with their own address. Inside the houses, we have a very readable and linked circulation with open spaces, 2 patios, and closed volumes. Volumes that are fragmented, so that in fact the large scale of this cluster is really humanized by the little volumes you will see in the pictures. So each house has kind of a transversal living room with a very open view to what happens with the logistics in the inner courtyard and linked to a private garden. And this is the opportunity to build a 6th house. So this was the model we made in the competition that shows us very well the intentions and that had a kind of a typical architecture. But during the design phase, we made some research models, we re-questioned, and in fact, we ended up with a structure in which each house is composed by very basic volumes stick to one to another. So this means that in fact, this is an image of the sketch phase where you can see this kind of clustered small houses and the ringway leading to it. The second ambition was obviously to have inside of the houses an open view to the courtyard and a relation with the houses on the other side of the courtyard. This ended up with this basic plan, the plan with we finally realized for the houses, where you can well see the 5 houses, their entrance doors, their open spaces towards the courtyard. This is what it looks like today. And what for us is very nice, and in fact, this courtyard is being used in several ways. It's a meeting place when parents come to visit their children, but it's also a place where they give parties, events, where they dance. So you will see, I will show you a small movie. It's really becoming a place where people gather. And for us, that's the main aim of this project, this link between the housing and this space. And obviously the architecture afterwards needs to be well designed, well treated, with good details. But our ambition is to construct for these people to give their possibilities. So as you can see, they have kind of a system where every day a small bus brings them the food and the truck stops in front of the living room. This realizes a direct link and between the people that are living in the houses and the people that work on the site. So this social interaction, more or less every day on the same hour, is something that works very well, and where these people with severe, sometimes very severe handicaps profit of the humans working, of the people working. So there is we don't distinguish the logistics and the housing for the peoples. It's all part of one project. And this is when they give parties and they appropriate this space. This appropriation of spaces by the people who uses them is very important for us. You will see in the other projects also that the architecture obviously is about the object, the well-designed object, but what is much more important is the way people deal with it and what we create for them. So it's about parties, but it's also about the people taking care of the vegetation, passing by every day. And so it's kind of a small world within the private domain. There's another picture where you can see the main house, the main living room, and the door with its address. Each house has also a number, so it's really like a personal home. We created 2 typologies of houses. So within the same framework, there were very different profiles of people living there. So this is for people that needs a lot of care. So we had one large, continuous, flexible space that opens towards the courtyard and towards the private gardens around one patio. On the left side, you have the night part of the housings. There's the rooms with the central, the bathrooms in the center. Then you have the day side with the open kitchen and these spaces. But for us, it's very important. And in fact, the living space is extended into the hallway. We create in this way, we create small corners where people also live. So the split between day and night becomes more subtle, and the hallways are much more than a hallway. This is a section where we can see the different volumes and the patio. And this is, if I can relate to the image we made for the sketch design, what happened when we realized it. So the ambition of the competition was maintained, and the architecture evolved, obviously, but the main goal was respected. So this is towards the private garden, a view from the open kitchen, then into the hallway. This is what I just tried to explain, that in fact by these large hallways, they create a continuity, and people also appropriate at the end of the hallway their proper spaces. This is a view from the hallway. And then from one of the rooms, when they open the rooms, there's also a link from the private room towards the living room. This is a view of a private room for one of the patients living there. So this is a nice picture of a girl who found her place and is really appropriating it in ways we didn't imagine, in fact. The second house is very different. It's the same architecture, but plan-wise is different because this is for people, for children with autistic problems. So they don't like the large space. They wanted to have small living rooms. So we made a large patio, made 2 patios, in fact, and smaller living rooms where smaller groups can occupy these spaces. And the kitchen becomes also a closed kitchen. So in the first view, it's very similar, but in all the detailing, it's really made to measure, measure-made to the typology of the people living there. So this is a section with the 2 patios, and then some views of these houses, where instead of having a large continuous living space, we have 3 smaller spaces and an extra outdoor room for these people. A view from within the kitchen just before they moved in, and a view from the patio. I will not talk about materials and details. I think the pictures speak for themselves. We put a lot of energy in it, but it seems like the natural way of realizing our ideas into the projects. Some more pictures, and these are the pictures from when the houses are in use, with the kids living in it, and using the patio in a good way. You can see all these relationships between rooms, people living there. This is from one room towards the hallway, and this is a view from the garden, the private garden for the kids, and the front side of these houses. So I have a small movie that hopefully will appear.
En lekker gaan rusten, hè vrienden? Hoe is het atelier?
Zonnetje, hè? Ja. Voilà. Voilà.
So that was the first project. The second project I would like to show you is a small school in Antwerp. In fact, a very nice space, a very particular school in the middle of a park. When we first visited the site, we were impressed by the size of the trees and also the position of the existing school that was located in two very similar buildings like these ones. In the middle of the park. So we saw no fences. That means that the kids played in the middle of the park. There was no distinction between the playground for the kids and the park, school and park, everything was one, which is very exceptional in Belgium because people here tend to put fences everywhere to make very closed castles over schools. So that's what we liked and appreciated a lot. So this is what the existing situation was like, two existing buildings with a central courtyard and a lot of large trees around it, very impressive trees. So our suggestion was we needed to respect the inner space and the two facades towards the existing central courtyard. But by adding two distinguished volumes, separate volumes, we wanted to have a mix plan-wise between the park and the park and the school. So we created within these volumes open spaces that are very well linked towards the park and open to the park. And when the school is closed, the park continues towards the school. So there is no fence, no ambition to make a closed territory for the school. It's a school in the middle of the park. By the new volumes we wanted to introduce, we had the ambition to make small, very horizontal volumes, low-rise buildings that are really designed with a lot of respect for these existing trees. Underneath the trees, we have these small pavilions that create space. So this was more or less a sketch we made during competition, where we showed a little bit our ambition, and a model we recently made that show, in fact, the components of the project, the existing buildings and the two new buildings in the middle of the wood. So this is more or less the basic plan we had. So in the existing building, we made all the collective spaces. There is a collective transversal space in the middle. There are the rooms for the teachers, the rooms for the personnel. There was a second volume, which sports room we introduced on this side, which is the bike sheds. And a third volume is the very particular round volume with three large classes that open in all directions towards the landscape. So this is an image we made in the competition that shows our ambitions, how we thought the exterior space could live. And this is a picture we took more or less 1 month ago, because the school just opened in September, where you can see that our ambition was respected. So I will explain you a little bit the three buildings. First of all, we have this interior space. On the right side, we have the sports place. And this is the picture we took with the new facade and the new introduction of the new building. So this is an overview where you can see the three buildings, and where you can also see that in a lot of projects, we really invest in between spaces. So we have the heated inside space of the school, but you have this kind of transition between the inside and the outside with covered spaces. It's kind of a theme that appears in a lot of our projects. We have to make for sustainability very compact buildings, closed buildings, but by doing research and work on these in-between spaces, we can enrich our projects. So this is from the other side. So where you can see that this volume is very horizontal and is really in a very respectful situation towards the existing environment. So this is the plan of the reconstructed space, the existing building, the central space, transversal space, people for the spaces for the teachers and service spaces. And on the upper floor, we have an open space and some individual teaching rooms. So we did a lot of research with respect for the existing building without wanting to be historical correct or to have historical imitation, but just wanting to add a new layer on an existing building. And so this is what it looks like today with its central space and the specific roof elements we added, and a new palette of colors for the windows. So this is a detail we made for these roof elements. And so a picture that shows how the building is today. In this building, we did huge interventions in the inside, in which we wanted to respect the wooden structure that is existing, but by really adding volumes and new interventions to create kind of a nice mix between the existing wooden structures and the existing historical elements and the new interventions. This is what you see here. We have these wooden beams that are maintained, but we also have these kind of very contemporary interventions that interact with the existing structure. This is another image of the existing school, existing building, and one in the other direction. This is a central space that opens up to the playground, central playground for the kids, collective space. This is the school building with 3 classrooms. This is a very particular school because they have classrooms of 50 to 70 kids in one space. So in fact, they have not the traditional classes of 25, 30 persons. They work in larger groups that are split up in very small groups. So the intention was to create, their individual classrooms, but also to create kind of a continuous space with a lot of subspaces where they can organize it, that they can appropriate and organize themselves. Where you can see on the other line, you have this canopy, this covered canopy. That is the in-between space between the outside and the inside. But that also helps us to respect the legal obligation to have cover space for schools. So it's kind of a very subtle way to implement norms and regulations. So this is a model we made for an exposition 2 years ago that shows, in fact, the very horizontal aspect of the building, and this is what it looks like when you put it into the existing situation. So with the in-between spaces that have a variety in depth, and that is linked to pathways to the other buildings. This is from the inside, a sketch from the competition and the situation today. With this continuous space, the entrance, inside view for the classrooms that are really open up towards the exterior spaces that are appropriated. Some images we made for the competition and an image of the interior today. Where we wanted to have these low buildings, we needed to realize the sports rooms that needs a height, an important height below the ceiling. So we chose to sink this volume into the existing landscape and to have a kind of in the exterior, same height of building as the classroom building. That's what you can see here. So it's very similar in detailing, in appearance. But it is in the inside a very different space. So we have the same details, the same in between structure space from the inside to the outside, and then the inside with the sunken play field, sports field in the glass, which is very nice here from the inside. That in the other side of the site you can see the other building. And the same principles of sketches we made for the competition, and then the realized situation more or less 5 years after the competition. The next project I would like to show is a very important project for us because it's a small house in the middle of Ghent. We made for my sister-in-law. So the client was in the research of a parcel for an economic house, with a very tight budget, and they had difficulties finding such a plot in the city. So when one day these two houses, you can see here, the yellow one and the white one, were sold together. So we proposed to the client to buy these two houses, to live for a certain time in one house, to reconstruct the other house, then move from one house to the other one, and to sell again the house they initially lived in. So it was a construction with the bank, with loans, but we managed to create kind of a scenario where we reorganized the plot. So this on the left side is the existing plot, where you can see the number 55 having a very strange configuration of limit of parcel. So we straightened this on the right side. So they lived in the number 57 for 6 months. And in the meantime, we could construct the number 55. It was a very narrow plot. It's only 3.70 meters on the most wide side, and I think 2.95 meters on the front side. The house is really developed in section in which we introduced kind of 3 volumes with kind of 2 openings, which allow daylight to go deep into the house. And in a second element is to create daylight, but also to create inner relationships. So what was very important for us, as you can see in the section, is that in fact, the living space that is here extends towards a working space on the first floor. So you could get into the house in a very low below ceiling, and you get into a second space that is quite high below ceiling, but creates immediately a link to the space above the entrance. So by introducing this split level system, we could realize kind of a generous house with daylight and views for a very limited budget, and only with 105 square meters for the complete house. So we had a very tight budget, but also a very short period of constructing, because as they lived in the next house, we had to deal with the bank. So within 6 months, we needed to construct the house. And this is what it looks like today. It's quite kind of very modest, but very present in the same time, because these are houses by the well-known Belgian architect Victor Horta, an Art Nouveau architect. So these are these huge volumes, and it kind of stucks itself towards these very impressive housings. It's a very different approach, but it's part of the richness of the city, in our opinion. So this is a view from the backside. So then from the inside in the other direction, the living space. And then when you turn around, you can see the entrance below ceiling, and then the workspace with the visual relation towards the living space. So that's what you clearly can see here. Then we go to the staircase, go up in the other direction. It's all constructed with very basic materials, but with a lot of research done on proportions and inner relationships between spaces. This is a view from the workspace on the first floor towards the living space, and then a view from one of the rooms into the central staircase with the zenithal lighting. This is one room, and then the mezzanine of one room. Which was very nice, in fact, that when we constructed this house, we did not have a mezzanine initially, but the client was pregnant and had twins. So we needed to, during construction, add a half level to the building. But it worked out quite well. So here you can see the extra mezzanine into the upper floor room. But this was 10 years ago. The twins today are almost 10, 11 years. And we are at this point working on an extra extension on the existing house. So I will show you a small movie of the daily use of the house. 8 years ago in a small village in the middle of Flanders where we needed to construct next to the church and next to the existing graveyard. So what we saw that in fact we had this construction plot, and there is quite a difference in the height, in the topography into the site, where the church is really constructed on the high point of the village. And on the other side, we have kind of a lower park. So we wanted to construct a building that mediates between the two levels, where we have classrooms opening to the park, where we have a common community space opening to a public space on the left side towards the church, and to have the classrooms for the older kids on the upper floor. So this here where you can see the situation and our building within the context, and where you can see very good that in fact there is quite an important difference in topography between the lower side and the higher side of the church, with our building trying to make a link between the upper part and the lower part of the construction site. So here you can see the plan. What was particular that by choosing in really the plot having mediating between the two levels and wanting to create an open playground in a large part of the site, we needed to construct very near to the existing graveyard. This is the graveyard. So the building in a way shapes itself around the courtyard, creates an open space between the church and the building. It is a playground for the kids, but can also become during weekends kind of a public space in which the main hall of the school can be used for extra activities by the local community. So this is what we see in this scheme. In fact, we really defined a playground which can become a public space between two buildings in weekends on Wednesday afternoons. So this is how it looks like, where you have the building that is really connected to kind of creates a limit to the existing graveyards, and the playground that can be opened, you cannot see it here, to the left of the picture, towards the public space, with a construction that put the accent on the entrance towards the entrance of the school. You have some pictures here from the graveyard and then from the playground. This is a detail of the building on the upper floor. And then on the lower floor, we have the other direction. In fact, we have kind of an existing building that opens towards a playground that extends into the park. Here we also aimed, as in the other project, to take create spaces for the kids without fences, but the school was very hard. They really wanted a fence, you will see. So here we needed this fence, unfortunately, because otherwise it would be a very continuous space. But we more or less negotiated a small an opening so that under surveillance they can also use the park as a playground. So these kinds of accidents happen when the client was aiming to remove the tree for the fence, but I think we should have a lot of respect for existing situation. So we just made a knot into the fence. This is the building from the lower side. So this is the more technical section that shows how we make the link between the different topographies. So I will guide you. We'll walk through the building. So we have the entrance towards the school with a view on the landscape. And then some very nice, I think, very well done research at the office to create very basic details, but with a lot of respect for proportion and a kind of simplicity in the choice of materials and colors. So this is the plan of the upper floor, the central staircase, from the middle floor, sorry, with the central staircase and the community space, communal space. So this is where you enter the building. This is the space that opens up to the playground, which is also used not only by the school, but also by the local community. Then towards the hallway with a very quite monumental central staircase to the first floor. That is the plan of the first floor, where you have no real hallways, but a kind of over-dimensioned hallway that becomes a shared space for all the classrooms, with the 6 classrooms on top. So this is this shared space that can be appropriated. You will see immediately in a small movie, staircase coming up. And then the classrooms with a palette of materials that are quite harmonious and very basic. In fact, what we aim to is it should create the possibility for the teachers and the kids to make their own thing out of it. It should not be too dictating. These are the small the classrooms below the roof. Then the staircase, this staircase that goes to the lower floor, where you have this same shared space and 3 classrooms that open up to the playground. So this is this shared space that profits of zenithal lighting, light in the back. And then these classrooms that extend towards the external playground. We also have a small movie of this one.
Centiliter en 1000 milliliter. Dat gaat je heel veel helpen bij die oefening. Dan weet je naar welk getal je moet gaan als je een centiliter, een deciliter of een milliliter zit.
Zorg ik dat het op je vuurpoot komt.
Nee, je naam staat er.
Ja. Als jij de naam erop gaat, gaat het altijd fout. Maar ik wil dat ik zo wat moet doen.
Ja, Philip. Zie je?
Ben je klaar? Ik weet het niet op ons, ik ga je jas aan dicht doen. Nee, de aardbei. De aardbei, dan moet die. Super, gedaan.
So I have more projects left. I will try to do it quickly. This is a social housing project in Ghent, on the border of Ghent, where the brief was to demolish this building and to make low-rise new buildings. So we made a proposition to the client to maintain the building and to do some interventions. So this is the basic scheme with mono-oriented housings. That was the existing of the project. So we did some research on the structure and we thought we could introduce transversal housings with double orientation. So that's what was our ambition, by maintaining the existing building and to add on the same typology 2 lower buildings. So we could obtain this by introducing duplex apartments and have kind of on the third level, a link that links these duplexes towards the house with the central corridor. So the last step we did is on the south side, we added a light structure. So people had some exterior space to each house, south orientated. So here you can see in the section the duplexes, but you can also see every 2 levels, the horizontal hallway on several levels, and the duplexes that sometimes go up and down. This is more or less what the building looked like in the model with the 2 new low-rise buildings, and then the completely reorganized structure and the existing structure provided with the new envelope. So this is more a situation within the city, where you can see that the building really is on the border of the city, quite busy city, but that on the backside, it opens up completely towards a more residential and green area. So here are some details where you can see how, in fact, the buildings don't touch each other. We have these hallways that link the front with the backside. This is from the backside. And then the way people use it and appropriate it towards the backside. It becomes a light volume But it was very important that, in fact, we could convince the client, because by maintaining the building, which is a very sustainable choice, because we don't need a lot of gray energy to construct a new building, we could construct 20% more of houses than they originally asked for. So this is the front side with the entrance, and then the back side, where you can see that you have the architecture, but you also have the appropriation by people. So the building could look quite strict, but once people start living in it, it becomes lively and appropriated. That's what you can see here. So in fact, you have a kind of a very complex puzzle of three-dimensional houses within the volume with different typologies. This is the plan. Here you can see these transversal apartments with the hallway that links towards the two buildings on the left and the right side. And then you can see the quite a complex section with a variety of duplexes. So people can use their balconies. There is a kind of generosity introduced. There are some, even if it's social housing with a very tight budget, we could maintain some nice details on the interior, and where people really in the new housings have these kind of spaces that are double orientated. You can see how people really appropriate the structure, which remains very present by its color, but that it can support a lot of interventions by the people, as you can see here. And I hope a very satisfied person living in here. The last project I would like to show is a cultural center in Kasterlee, where we had a double program. The public spaces of the village needed to be completely redone, and the construction of a cultural center. So this was the existing situation where, in fact, in the central place of the village, we had a lot of roads, traffic, and our goal was to limit traffic, to have smaller streets, and to create new public spaces. 3 large spaces that can become really places where you can enjoy and stay during the day. So we organized them with greenery, and we introduced a real new forest of trees into the central space. We could do this because, in fact, we had the opportunity to create a building with a public space for activities. That's how we introduced on several spaces kind of light structures that organize the public space. And you can have below the trees, when there's an event, the smaller interventions, and the larger objects can be towards the new cultural center. So this is the model of the whole operation. And these are pictures of last week. And normally by the end of the year, the complete village should be reorganized, where in fact, the greenery will become very important next to the essential traffic links. So this was for the central space, which are constructed, but we had the first object was to create a new cultural center in the back. So our goal was to create kind of a continuous ground floor where we have spaces that are continuous towards the outside, towards kind of a public space, but also to have no backside and a kind of secondary green space on the other side. This is what it looks like in the execution plans, where you have here the central hall, the multifunctional hall, the reception space, and a small cafe. So what was for us is very important is in this small village, we have these kind of large volumes, but by having a kind of a ring with just one level on the complete outside, the first approach is one of a human scale, a human size. So that's what you see here in the back. The building does not appear as a huge building because there is a kind of a lower approach an in-between or space between the higher volumes and the outside. So when the public spaces are kind of defined by small steel structures. You can see here, building from the outside, then from the backside, and then kind of developing a plan where in different occasions there is a multifunctional use of the building with for on a Thursday, by instance, on a Thursday night. But then on other occasions, you can have a very different events, a dance party, and maybe an exhibition with a cafe. And on other times, they can also have a small party. So the ambition was to make an event hall that can be used in very different ways. So also we have a configuration with a small intimate space, for instance, for a play or a dance performance. So these are the spaces that surround, that are continuous and make a link between the outside and the central parts of the building. This is the reception area. This is the main section towards the hall. So here you can see the hall in the theater configuration. So where the scene can become part of a small play, but by day, by having these large windows in the back, it can also become a space where people can dance or do rehearsals during the day. So this is the view from the scene, one view from the seatings. And then when you go down again towards the reception space. So to end, this is a last movie I will show, and then the lecture is more or less done. We'll see, we'll get questions. Thank you.
Pozreli ste si prezentáciu architektonického štúdia Dierendonck Blancke. Na linke bol Alexander Dierendonck. Alexander, thank you very much. That was fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it. We did.
Yes. Okay, I hope so.
Thank you very much. We are sending greetings to Isabel.
Okay, I will do them. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us, and it was a pleasure to have you here with us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. One more time, Alexander.
And good luck with your festival.
Ďakujeme pekne. Thank you very much. Lúčime sa so štúdiom Dierendonck Isabel Blancke, ktoré vzniklo v roku 1999 a ktoré sa vám odprezentovalo so svojimi projektami počas prvého dňa Dní architektúry a dizajnu a Dní architektúry a filmu.